Okay, hopefully you're finishing up your resume site and you're thinking about, is this really a website? Can I really show this to people? Can I really put this online? The answer to all those questions is yes, you can, and you should too. So let's talk about how you can publish it. First of all, we're going to be talking about domain names, for instance, and there's been a lot of news about domain names lately. There's lots of new domain names available. Here's links to a couple of news stories about these things, which I will leave there, and you can read them at your leisure if you wish. So the traditional route of getting a domain name, the domain name, remember, is the base of your URL. For instance, if it's www.jackdowns.com, the domain name is jackdowns.com. A good domain name is critical to the success of any enterprise, any web enterprise. Think of it as your business name. So you have to get the name, and you have to pay for web hosting. That's something separate. It's space where your website will sit, and then people can come and find it. So it's essentially space on a computer on the internet for web hosting. A good overview of these things, here's a website which will review these for you. I'm just going to go to it briefly. And we didn't want that or that. We already looked at, or I told you could look on your own website. Domain name, what's a domain name? How advice about it? Web hosting, what it is? Recommendations for web hosting, and so on. This website is useful, although many sites that talk about all this information, they may very well be promoting one domain name or hosting service or another for you to buy. So just be on your guard about that. And we'll continue with that in a moment. Let's continue here and say that domain names. So if you're going to get a domain name, it must be simple, obvious, short as possible. It should be the name of your brand, connected, something that's going to make sense with search engines. It must be unique. That's one of the big problems. Most of the obvious domain names are taken. It helps now that we have a whole bunch of more dot whatevers. We have dot, so dot all kinds of things now. But everyone still wants .com, or maybe net, or maybe biz. You can't, and org. You can't get .edu or .gov. Those are for particular, either for educational organizations or for government organizations. So you could think about adding a word, think about changing the punctuation. For more about domain names and the process you should go through to think of one, should you want to get your own, and you at least, if nothing else, you should go search your name. I'll show you how to do that in a minute, to make sure that see if yours is taken or reserved by someone. And you should probably at least go, if it's not, you should go reserve it and keep it forever. Pay for it forever, I'm afraid. So let's look at that website. Tips on choosing a domain name. Should be your website name. Let's make this bigger. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but just wanted to review some big concepts. It's the name of your business, your brand. It's probably better not to be generic. It's better if it's short, but it could be up to 67 characters. Hyphenated names, some advantages and disadvantages to them. Plurals, like or putting the word the in front of my, in front of things like that. What should you try to get? Com, org, net, or so on. How important is it? And in conclusion, so some very good advice here on names that you might get. And for a laugh, I'm going to show a few of these. Getting a bad domain name, not thinking through the domain name, not seeing how it's really going to look when you type it out, could be horrible. And here's some examples that are horrible. How about IT Scrap, which of course looks like something else.com? That would be a bad choice. How about WhoRepresents.com? I'm not sure if you want to write that out and have that be your brand. How about Penn Island? Well, that makes sense. Let's do pennisland.net. Might be a problem there. How about Experts Exchange? Might be a problem there too. So what about speed of art? Sounded good until I wrote it out. I'll let you look through the rest of these yourself if you are a board panda. But just to say that you have to really plan out your domain name before you go buy it. Okay. And that's what you have to do. We say buying a domain name, but you're really doing is renting it, because you only buy it for a certain length of time, and you have to keep paying. If you buy it for 1 year or 3 years or maybe 5 years, some deals are, and then you have to make sure every time it comes up, you have to pay again, pay again. Domain names are registered with ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And of course, we know that the domain name actually links to an IP address. That's the real thing that's behind it, right? But we use domain names, computers use IP addresses. When you buy a domain name, it's linking it to an IP address. That's how it works. Domain name registrars are the companies that provide this service of registering the domain name with ICANN and keeping it reserved for you. The cost is usually about $10 to $30 a year. There's lots of companies that do this. GoDaddy is a big example of it. Domain name. Actually, then they do hosting also. In fact, you can get the whole package here for about $1 a month. And that would be if you got it for probably 3 years or something. And there's lots of other sub-values and lots of other deals on GoDaddy. GoDaddy is one of the biggest domain name registers and hosting services too in the world. So this would be a good place to search to find out if your domain name was taken. But you might also go to, because registrars usually offer other services. They offer hosting, email, e-commerce, and many more. It's tough to compare the costs sometimes, because you have to just figure out what services you really want. And the whole domain name thing is in many places become conflated with the whole hosting service, so it all becomes a single fee. So that's tough, and you have to take some work and really figure out what services you want and where's the best place to buy them. Just because you search your domain name at one place doesn't mean you have to buy it there. For instance, I'm going to go to Better Who Is, which is a very simple search function, and I'm going to search jackdowns.com. I want to get jackdowns.com. Well, unfortunately, I would find out, because I did this recently, it is reserved. You know, a couple of years ago it wasn't reserved. Unfortunately, now it is. It's actually reserved by somebody who is a speculator. There's people who go out and buy up lots of domain names, and then they hold on to them for a while, sometimes just for a couple of years, sometimes for longer, waiting to see if someone will come along and want to buy it from them for a little bit more, a little higher rate than you would have gotten if it was open and you just register it. Because I can go to Jack Downs and put a hyphen in there and say search it. It's available. So I could go ahead and rent that. Buy it, we say, but it's really renting, right? But would I want Jack-Downs? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. There's some pluses and minuses there. So I could have to think about that. So once you stick your own name in, and to either GoDaddy or someplace like Better Who Is, and see if it's available. Okay, let's continue along here. So these domain name resellers, like that guy who bought up jackdowns.com, this is an article about buying a registered domain name. If you have any interest in that, you might want to take a look at this article, how to buy a domain names are registered, and some suggestions and advice about how to do that. Web hosting introduction. So that was all about domain names. Now what about web hosting? You need to rent the space online and buy the services that you want to make your website work. Prices can vary a lot, from $3 a month, maybe $15 a month, maybe even more, depending on what kinds of stuff you want, if you want a lot of e-commerce stuff and so on. Most offer email and a bunch of other services, including design help too. Here's some links to some places you might go to find out about them. For instance, this about how to choose a web host, goes through all of the services that you might see offered there, and you can get definitions of them and find out what sort of things might be useful. And then here is a a list of some reviews. There's many review sites. If you go through review sites, you'll see there's hundreds and hundreds of hosting services out there. Bluehost is often used by people who do WordPress sites. More on that in a minute. So you're going to do some research and find a host. Maybe it's the same place that you get your domain name. Maybe you get your domain name now, and then later go to a hosting service. That's all up to you. You just need a credit card to do it. And there's some more articles about reviews of web hosting services. So there's other things to consider, though. Are you going to do a WordPress site? WordPress is the biggest of the online site creation tools. And you might say, hey, if I was going to do WordPress, why did I take this whole class? Well, the reason is to customize your WordPress site, knowing HTML and CSS is a really good idea. So WordPress hosting, if you went to WordPress hosting, it would tell you that Bluehost is very good for WordPress users, and they suggest some other host services also. So that might be a consideration, right? But also, by the way, about WordPress sites, let's take a look at some award-winning WordPress sites, and you see that you can do a lot of different things with WordPress sites. Just because it's an out-of-the-box site and it doesn't involve templates, you get a huge amount of customization. But of course, you have to, for the really good WordPress sites, you may have to pay some additional money to WordPress too. But in case you're interested in WordPress, I really think that you should learn HTML, learn CSS, build your own site as you're doing now, and then think about something like WordPress, which gives you a lot of other behind-the-scenes database work and e-commerce work, and takes care of that stuff for you. But what you've learned is still useful. So, and you might need to know about FTP. Remember, we mentioned FTP a long time ago, it seems. There's free software like FileZilla, which is for PCs, which you can use to move your files up to the host. Dreamweaver, we haven't discussed much, but it has a FTP site server inside of it. And but you don't have to do all this, pay all this money at this stage if you don't want to. You just want to get your resume website up there so you can show it to potential employers. Well, while you're here at SUNY Plattsburgh and for 30 days after you graduate, you can use the My File system for free simple web hosting. Here's a tutorial. I strongly suggest you go and you read through this. It's pretty simple. It tells you how to make a folder, how to go to your My Files, how to log in, how to make a folder there. You have to make a website folder. And then you just go stick your index.html in there and your other files, and they all work. Sometimes there's a little delay of a couple hours until they actually go live. And to change it out, if you want to make changes, you just have to load the files up again, delete the files and load them up. You have all the control over this stuff. So that's a link to it. I did it as an example. The thing is, you get a URL that looks like this: http personal.plattsburgh.edu and then / and then your username. So it isn't the prettiest URL in the world. This is what the site I did. I put this site up. This is actually a little exercise site from an exercise we haven't done on the 960 grid system. So I put this up just so it could be seen here and see how easy it is to put a website up on My Files. And that was the link. So that's actually on the internet, not on my disk or something like that. And you can use a URL shortening service. More of those in a minute. We'll go to is good in just a moment and look at something there. But first I wanted to show you that. Another free alternative is Dropbox. Dropbox is a free online storage system, and you have to go through this setup. Here's an example of here's some documentation you can use, and I have a PDF on Moodle in the area where the presentations are about how to set up your Dropbox account to make it work as a public web server, essentially. But then you get this, look at this URL. It's a big, long, ugly URL. Maybe that's just too big and too long for you. Well, one option is I could take that URL, which it's trying to find now. There it is, finally. This was a little site I started to build a while back and never really finished up, did much with. I could take that URL and go to a URL shortening service and plug it in. These are like referral services. That great big URL is now this little URL. And it's still a pretty ugly URL, but at least it's a little one. I could copy that And if I use that URL, it now